You ever hear somebody say, he's a little pregnant? No, you either are or you aren't. The same thing applies with the word commitment. You either are or you aren't.
You are Locked On USC, your daily podcast on the USC Trojans, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Fight on, everyone. I'm your host, Mark Hulkin, and thanks for making Locked On USC. It's part of the Locked On Network, your first listen every day, whether you are watching this show on YouTube. You know you can download this podcast on any platform, and it's always going to be free, and I'm always going to appreciate your support. There's no gray area, okay? If you're committed, you're committed. I talked about it before on the show. You're either all in or you're out when it comes to USC's 2026 recruiting class. Pretty black and white. Again, no gray area with the word commitment. I don't care what source you want to use to go find your definition of the word commitment. It all comes up the same. There's literally a definition. I'm going to give you two. The state or quality of being dedicated to a cause, activity, etc., or an engagement or obligation that restricts freedom of action. You've made a commitment. I don't care how many stars you have next to your name. If you're, a football recruit, a prospect, if USC's interested in you, I don't care how many stars. And for the most part, neither does USC's coaching staff. I mean, they'll use it as a reference point, but that's not the overriding factor. Doesn't matter if you're a 3-star, 4-star, 5-star. You're not bigger than the program, no matter who you are, no matter where you're from, or especially whatever position you play. It doesn't matter. So yesterday, that significant news that everyone was waiting for, it happened the following day, mid-afternoon, Wednesday, right? Elite linebacker Xavier Griffin from Gainesville, Georgia, is no longer a member of USC's now number 2 ranked recruiting class. Oh no, USC, they suck again. Yeah, USC fell all the way from number 1 down to number 2. How will they survive? I'll say this. And look, I want to make sure this is very clear. It's nothing personal about Xavier Griffin or his family. It has nothing to do with them per se. However, I think USC needs to stay away from those early commitments, especially from elite players who are from out of state. Do not take their commitments until they're done taking all their visits, until they're over. Usually, official visits are done by the end of June. USC can wait that long. I'm not saying avoid recruits from the state of Georgia. For the last 2 years, you're thinking, well, maybe USC should avoid those guys. And look, for every one Cameron Fountain who stays the course, there's going to be 4 to 5 others who probably just, you know what, they're going to want to enjoy the process and then eventually stay closer to home. Let me give you Xavier Griffin's version of what went down, why he decommitted from USC. And he's been committed since last summer. Quote, "My commitment has been a question for a few months now, but the hard decision has come within the last 2 weeks. I wanted to still be able to enjoy my process and go on my official visits, but respectful of USC at the same time. So this happened after a lot of talking with my mom and praying. I work hard every day on and off the field, so I want to enjoy this process while I can and make sure I explore all of my options. We only get one shot, and if it wasn't fair to USC to continue to do that while being committed to them, I definitely want to be able to shut it down and be committed before the season starts and focus on my senior year." End quote. Look, I appreciate Xavier coming out saying, quote, it wasn't fair to USC as part of his mea culpa. But did you notice that he also said he wants to enjoy the process twice? Let me translate that for everybody. In other words, he's saying he enjoys the process of being fawned over, recruited, hearing all the offers coming his way. When you're an elite player and everybody wants you, it's a pretty cool feeling. I get that. And when you got schools like Alabama and Texas knocking on your front door consistently, saying, hey, that offer wasn't good enough. How about this offer? All of a sudden you say, you know what? Let's entertain some more opportunities. Again, got no problem with that. Nothing wrong with that. But this is why USC took control of the situation. Look, if Griffin's commitment was a question for the last few months, according to him, then I'll say he faked it pretty well each time he came out to USC. He's been out to USC multiple times since he committed last summer. A few times this year alone. USC doesn't need to have Xavier, or anyone for that matter, that wants to play the recruiting game. Show up with an offer sheet later down the line and say, hey, match it. USC doesn't have it. USC is not taking that approach this year. They think they're being very liberal with their NIL offers, upfront with, hey, look, if you want to take your visits, great. Before you commit to USC, get that out of the way. Don't commit and then come back a couple months later and say, hey, you know what? I want to take some visits. That dog doesn't hunt this year. Once Chad Bowden took over the general manager role at USC, a new recruiting strategy was implemented. USC decided that its commits were going to be fully committed, right? No visits anywhere else after they make that announcement. There's no second guessing. For instance, Brandon Lockhart, friend of the show, who I've interviewed here, he just posted, after Xavier's announcement came down, he posted a message over there on X, formerly known as Twitter. He said, my parents are committed to one another, and I don't think they like or allow the other to go on dates to check things out elsewhere. Yeah, it's not it's not an apples to apples comparison, but you understand the point he's making. They made a commitment to each other. Doesn't matter how long they've been together. Once you've done that, you don't get to second guess and say, well, let me just make sure. Let me go on a date. I love you. However, just to be sure, that's not how it works. It's pretty straightforward. Being in a committed relationship, it requires discipline, period. Speaking of discipline, why do we put so much emphasis on that, that value of discipline on the field, off the field, making good choices, yada, 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 all the things we hear about when it comes to, college football programs, players, having position rooms, being more disciplined, that type of stuff. So why do we put so much emphasis on that? But we're not going to hold people accountable and be disciplined during the recruiting process. That's not that's not an attack on someone's character. But does that only apply once they're signed? I have zero doubt that Xavier wanted to stay committed to USC as well as take his visits. That would be his perfect world. However, I also know that USC is staying true to its word. They're remaining disciplined. They're trying to build that culture. So if you watch the show, you know I hate hypocrites. Trust me. I really do understand the sentiment about, well, this recruiting strategy is dumb. We'll lose more guys over trying to make a point that we don't need to make. That's one argument that's come up. And yes, Pete Carroll let guys take visits after they were committed. But can we admit that Pete was recruiting when there wasn't a transfer portal or NIL that had contract negotiations with guys like, I don't know, who's Jackson Cantwell's, Drew Rosenhaus? I mean, we've got guys in high school with NFL agents, and now we're talking the big dudes, the Drew Rosenhauses of the world. So yeah, Pete was doing this during a different time. Back then, players had to sit out a year if they wanted to transfer. So it's not an apples to apples comparison. I want to be very clear. Xavier is a great talent. But USC, they've got to stick to their guns. There was always going to be a chance he was going to flip anyways. But look, if I'm a USC fan, and I am, I would probably look forward to USC's next commitment. I don't think it's going to take too long. USC, they don't want to live or kind of have their fan base feeling any negativity, any bad vibes. So I would anticipate something good happening sooner rather than later. And I also think it's more clear now why USC made that offer to Taylor Johnson just last week. You know, the linebacker from Cajon High School. Don't misunderstand me. Taylor is a hell of a prospect, and he should have been offered regardless. However, it does make me wonder, does USC extend the offer if Xavier Griffin was still committed? I think he's worthy of an offer, but it does make me wonder. So, looks like your linebacker class right now, you're going to have Sean Scott, you're going to have Taylor Johnson, Gimme Talanoa Ely. Let's call it a day. Are you good with those three linebackers? I know you would have been happier with Sean Scott and Talanoa and Xavier Griffin. But after everybody's watching Taylor Johnson's film, they're going, whoa, dude, that dude's a player. And if you look at the measurables, as far as height, weight, he and Xavier aren't that different. And he's local. So, yeah, I think that's going to be your linebacker room for the 2026 recruiting cycle. So there it is. Bad news, or just it is news. Just kind of speed bump, roll with it. USC's recruiting class isn't ruined, not even close. Again, they still have the number 2 ranked class in the country. It's not like they took some precipitous fall. Okay, 2 more segments to go. Let's talk about Chad Bowden and his recruiting strategy. You get a black eye? And then in the third segment, we're going to talk about the pending playoff structure and potential college football commissioner. That's coming up next. The days are getting longer, the weather is warming up, and people are spending more time outside, which means it's the perfect time to refresh your outdoor space. Whether you're working with a big backyard or a small balcony, Wayfair has everything you need to make it feel more like you. Wayfair's massive selection of outdoor essentials makes it easy to transform any space into your ideal summer setup. From comfy conversation sets to sleek dining tables and outdoor decor, they've got it all. And they got it all at prices that are going to fit your budget. Whether you're entertaining guests or just relaxing by yourself, shop Wayfair to help you unwind. And check this out. Delivery is free and hassle-free, even for the big stuff. Shop a huge selection of outdoor furniture online. This summer, get outside with Wayfair. Head to wayfair.com right now. That's WAYF like Frank, AIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. USC dropping Xavier Griffin isn't going to destroy this recruiting class, okay? Although, let's talk about it from an optics point of view. Did USC's general manager, Chad Bowden, did he just receive his first bad grade since taking over? over on wearesc.com, there's a debate going on, very healthy debate, as to whether or not Chad Bowden and Lincoln Riley are doing the right thing. Some think that, if you were committed to USC BC before Chad, then you shouldn't be lumped in with everyone else who has to follow the one rule. Again, the one rule: if you commit, your visits to other schools are over. Shut it down. Tell everybody thank you, but no thank you. Is this strategy? Is this fair to the players who were committed to USC before the law of the land was laid down? Of course it's fair. Nobody is above the law. Didn't want to go there, but kind of set itself up. I guess the underlying question: is this going to have a ripple effect with others who are in the class, or does just this send a stronger message? Remember, Cohen Brown, wide receiver, you want to take some visits? USC said, go for it, but you're not going to be a member of this class. Some will say, well, others have taken visits since they've committed. My response would be, without knowing all the details, okay, but what happens if somebody took an unofficial visit and right afterwards they were told, shut it down, or we're going to open up your recruitment for you? Is that too harsh? I know Brandon Lockhart took a couple of unofficial visits, but I also know that he shut it down. Once he came back from Oregon, it was like, I don't need this anymore. I'm done. I know where I want to go. So, and ever since then, he's been recruiting his butt off for USC's class. I mean, he is literally the Pied Piper of USC's 2026 recruiting cycle. Ever since Chad Bowden arrived, part of the recruiting message has been about building the culture, the essentials. Get guys committed, get them on campus as much as possible, and then let them start forming that bond, that camaraderie. So when those guys actually do show up on campus ready to enroll, they're already going to feel like they're a family. Look, culture building doesn't get to take a break, right? This isn't a game of hopscotch where you jump over things just to get to the end. So yeah, it doesn't matter if you're 3-star, 5-star, it doesn't matter. Everybody has to check every single box. They all have to sign their name, so to speak. Look, we're living in a world where people like to change definitions, come up with different scenarios to use words, the way they weren't meant to be used. I was one of those. In fact, I was one of the only people to question the impact a general manager can have on roster building. People said, well, Mark doesn't think a GM's necessary. Not what I said. What I said was, what kind of impact will he have? So far, it's been pretty good up until recently. Again, it's an optics thing. So I was one of the ones questioning what can happen, how much of a benefit will it be to USC? Nobody's been complaining about USC's approach, especially while they were ascending to that number one ranked recruiting class. Everyone's like, yeah, keep going, keep doing what you're doing. If it ain't broken, don't fix it. Is it broken now? Does he have to be perfect? No one bats 1,000. So you have to take an L every now and then. You got to take a loss. The question is this really a loss? Or, is it a setback? I'll say this. You don't like the optics because you never want to lose a player, especially one of Griffin's caliber. However, you also don't want to bend the rules because, the hot chick wants to go on a few dates before getting married. If you're engaged, I mean, think of a commitment as a promise ring. I don't know. Do they still do that today? Promise ring, you give it to your girlfriend and you're saying, here's the ring because I'm going to ask you to marry me when the time is right. And then all of a sudden, the engagement ring shows up when you sign your financial aid paperwork. You get your first paycheck. Now you're married. No one got all emotional when Cohen Brown decommitted. Why? Because he's a wide receiver? Because he's a 3-star? Because USC can pluck one of those with their eyes closed off of anybody's tree? I'll say it again. I don't care how many stars. It doesn't matter. The same logic has to apply with the higher rated guys too. They got to be part of the same culture, same locker room, read from the same book. Let's just keep the faith that the culture is stronger, even with the loss of Xavier Griffin in the recruiting class. And let's believe it's only going to continue to get stronger. There's some guys out there that are waiting to commit. Talanoa Ely, Malachi Lee, Samuel Utu, Mark Bowman, Luke Sorensen, Vance Spafford, the wide receiver who's committed to Georgia. Guess what? He's going to take a visit to USC. Is that hypocritical? Well, if Georgia allows their players to take visits, no. Is it a character flaw of Vance Spafford? No. But again, just like USC has to hold on to a player from the state of Georgia, Georgia has to do the same thing with a player from the state of California, i.e. Vince Spafford. All right. So tell me, is that a black eye for USC's general manager? Or is it just a little bit of a scratch, a little bit of a bruise? I don't think it's that big of a deal. Now, if all of a sudden you see a bunch of guys drop off, let's have this conversation again. But right now, I think we're good. I think USC is going to be just fine at linebacker. I get it. You never want to lose a guy who's that, rated that highly. You know how I feel about the star system. I'm not saying he's overrated. I'm saying we don't really know how he's going to perform in college until he actually takes a snap in college. Tackett Curtis was supposed to be all that in a bag of chips. Guess what? Turns out he wasn't. Again, just because you've got that 4-star or that 5-star next to your name doesn't mean you are a can't-miss prospect. It means you're probably pretty good. And that's why I always look at the offer sheet. Tell me who's offering you, then I know how good you are. All right, one more segment to go. $20 playoff teams is going to be way too many. And let me ask you, who should be college football's playoff commissioner? Who should just be college football commissioner? I don't know if they'll ever get to 20 playoff games or 20 playoff teams, excuse me. But we're starting to hear about playing games. It looks like they're going to be jumping to 16 teams. And you've got the big conference and the SEC saying, well, we're going to have 4 guaranteed spots. And just to make sure, they're talking about doing play-in games, kind of like the NCAA, basketball tournament. So in the big conference, they would have number 3 versus number 6 for seeding. They would have number 4 versus number 5 for a chance to get one of those automatic bids. No, stop. Do not pass go. We don't need to do that. Just like the NCAA tournament doesn't need 68 teams to figure out who the best team is, college football does not need so many teams in, we'll call it the participation trophy field. No one's pretending, look, You don't need that many teams to figure out who's good enough to win the national championship. You just don't. I'll say this, from a selfish point of view, from looking at it through the Cardinal and Gold goggles, if the regular season is going to be watered down and diluted because you get so many chances to make the playoffs, 2 to 3 losses in the big conference is still going to give you a chance to play in the playoffs. So somebody needs to explain to me why the USC versus Notre Dame series is in jeopardy. Now, we're talking about, the 12-team field, 14, 16-team, whatever that final number is going to be. I think it's going to jump from 12 to 16. And I think the end goal is 20. Turns out it's just going to be a money grab. We don't need it. So how do we corral everything? How do we get everybody, how do we slow it down, bring it back? Well, Nick Saban's name is coming up a lot. They're starting talking about a college football commissioner or a commission. Nick Saban is expected to become the co-chair of a new presidential commission on college sports, effectively serving as the closest thing to a commissioner of college football. For me, that's like asking the fox the best way to defend the hen house. They know how to break the rules, how to get in there. So go back to them and say, how do we prevent you from getting in there? Let me remind everybody. Coach Saban left the game early because he did not like the direction it was going. So it's kind of ironic that he helped create the issues that everyone's now doing above the table. Remember NIL? Before it was NIL, it was McDonald's bags full of cash under the table. Alabama was part of that. Dodge Charger U for a reason. Nick isn't stupid. Very smart man. He owned a dealership. Yeah. Anyways, get past that. So it's just weird that, someone who left the game because he didn't like the way it was turning out, the way it was developing, where the players had all the power, he helped create that monster. So while not officially a commissioner, I think his position and influence within the commission, he's probably a good figure to have in there. You want him to be part of a team, that's for sure. I mean, he's probably a really good source of information, understands the dynamics better than most. However, again, there has to be someone else out there who is maybe better equipped to be a commissioner. I came up with a couple of names. How about David Baker? I know, homer pick, Sam Baker's dad. Well, just give me a little bit of background on Dave. He helped start the Arena Football League. He was, I think, co-owner of the Anaheim team. He was also the NFL Hall of Fame commissioner for 8 years. Roger Goodell said, few people combine vision, passion, and dedication as completely as David Baker. In 7 years as president and CEO of the Pro Football Hall of Fame, David expanded the Hall's brand nationally and footprint locally in Canton, Ohio. The growth he envisioned led to the expansion of the Hall of Fame, spread to downtown Canton, and will continue to have a tremendous impact on the future of the Hall for decades to come. So he's a visionary. In other words, he can see down the line, look into the future and say, you know what? Let's plan for this. Let's start now, so when it happens, we'll be prepared. Now, the one drawback, he's up there in age. But I think he should definitely be on the commission for sure. What about Stanford's ex-head coach, David Shaw? I think he'd be a really good candidate. Very cerebral, really good coach. He was able to, if he could do to Stanford, take Stanford to the level he took him to, And I get it was after Jim Harbaugh. Still, he's not coaching right now. He's relatively young. He's in his 50s. That's young. I'm in my 50s. That's young. I think he'd be a good person. So who else? Hit me up in the comments section. Give me some names. All right. That's it for this episode of Locked On USC. I'll be back tomorrow. My Friday rant will be at the end of the show. We'll see what we'll be talking about. Will recruiting be part of the conversation? Something will come up. We'll talk about a lot of stuff. I'll always have something to talk about when it comes to USC football. Anything USC football related. I'm staying away from basketball right now. I got to figure out who the team is. But I'll get you all caught up on USC's roster as well. All right. You enjoy the show? You're watching on YouTube? Click that subscribe button if you haven't subscribed yet. Smash that thumbs up. It means a lot. And don't forget to hit that bell notification button. And then when you're done watching this episode, get on over there to wearesc.com. There's a lot of information over there. Stuff that I can't talk about here. All right. Till then, everyone, you know what to do.